This edition of MacVoices is supported by you, our viewers and listeners, through our new Patreon campaign. If you get value from MacVoices, please consider helping support the show by visiting patreon.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it's been a little while since we convened a MacJury, and it seemed like the perfect opportunity to do it with the Apple events today, or today as we record this. It's only a few hours post-event with new iPads, and let's see, what else? Mac Minis and all kind of stuff. So let's find out who's here, and then we'll get to it. I'm going to work around on my screen for no particular reason. First up, Mr. David Ginsburg. David, welcome. It's good to see you, as always.
Good to see you. This is actually my first time on MacJury. I've
Really?
been on MacVoices. I have not been on. Don't think I've been on MacJury before.
Oh, well.
If I recall correctly.
Okay, well,
glad to be here.
We have to get you some black robes.
Yes.
Yeah. And a powdered wig. Right?
Yeah.
Also with us, Mr. Mark Fuccio is back again. Mark, welcome.
Hi, Chuck. It's always great to be here. You've assembled quite a good panel here today, and it's making me think if I wasn't here, the average IQ would go up by 25 points.
20.
20.
And for his very first time, both on MacVoices and on a MacJury, Mr. Andrew Orr from the Mac Observer. Andrew, welcome. It's great to have you.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm delighted to have you. I've listened to you on Daily Observations plenty of times. I've read a pile of your articles, so it'd be great to have your insight into what happened today.
Yep, I look forward to it.
By the way, we may have one more joining us. We had one more positive response, but he got called away at the last minute. He was going to try to join us late, so if he does, we'll bring him in. So with that, gentlemen, we started the Apple event today in Brooklyn, New York, with the Retina display. But I do have to tell you one thing. I'm laughing at all the tech people who are griping about having to get up early because they live on the West Coast. Nobody ever seems to consider us East Coasters when we get up at 3 a.m. to order iPhones. So sorry, West Coast, But so we have a new MacBook Air, and some people would say finally. Impressions? David, lead us off.
Well, impressions. I thought a very nice looking machine. It was way overdue, like you said. Compared to the Air, it's been around for many years. Like the liquid crystal display, good display there. I was very impressed with the fact that they only did a Touch ID, so not the Touch Bar is not included, which I was good to hear, since I don't think the Touch Bar is not that exciting. But overall impression, I think very good. I think it's going to be a big seller.
Okay. Andrew, we'll put you up next.
I think this is a really big update for the MacBook Air. And, my first impression when I was watching the keynote is, what about the MacBook? The MacBook with no name? What's going to happen to that?
Yeah. Mark, how about you? Any first impressions?
Yes. I made a list of some of the things that are generally believed to be wrong with sort of the Mac lineup. And most of them is that some of the products are really old and stale. So stale, you think that maybe they're from the Obama administration, as some of them are. And I think Apple today, certainly on the MacBook Air, I think they really did a great job at a technology refresh. It's very compelling. It's interesting they have two USB-C ports. So, sort of like it's taking a message from the MacBook, of which I own one. I agree with David. I'm glad it doesn't have the touch bar, because a couple years in, I think the general consensus, it seems to be nice attempt, but it's not really a solution to a known problem. Except maybe for the fact that it does have the thumbprint ID, as does the new MacBook Air for unlocking. So I think that's valuable technology going forward. My only question is, why did it take so long? But that's that's the unanswered question. Millions of other people, as well as I'm sure, are pondering that. But I think they did a really good job. And I don't want to steal the thunder as we get on to some of the discussion of the iPad Pro, but I think overall they're doing a lot to sort of knit together some of their product line.
Yeah.
So good job, Apple.
Yeah, as far as to why it took this long, that's at this point it's water under the bridge because it's here now, and so you can ask that from a business perspective. You can ask that about a lot of the things right now, but as it is, the MacBook Air is not a machine that really interested me that much. I would love to see it put up against the current MacBook Pro and see, because I think there's a little bit of price differential, not a crazy one, but if I remember correctly, 7th and 8th generation processors, there's difference, and you have, as you said, the Touch ID. So we have there's not a clear winner here as far as I'm concerned.
Clear winners comparing what, the Air to one of the MacBook Pros?
Yeah. Well, and to the MacBook. It's interesting. I don't think, David, you seem to.
No, absolutely no comparison to the MacBook. In fact, I wanted to kind of just add on to what Andrew said. I'm surprised they kept the MacBook in the line, let alone they left the MacBook Air old generation still available to purchase at $999. So I guess my thought was with the old generation MacBook Air was the fact that I have a feeling people don't like the keyboard. And it was just kind of like what they did with the MacBook Pro. They left the old model, the 2015 model, was being sold for 2 extra years, 2 or 3 extra years. So that was what my thinking was. And yeah, just kind of the way the product, like what Mark said, the product line is kind of stale. You've kind of lumped this model in between the old Air and the MacBook. And where are they at other than this new model,
Yeah, so building on something David said, comparing to the MacBook, I have the MacBook, and AppleCare is really great because once a year I've had to go in and have the keyboard replaced. Well, this year, on its anniversary, AppleCare expired in June, and sure enough, late summer, early fall, I'm having problems with some of the keys. So. I've been looking around at Apple, their give back or trade in program, whatever they have it. I think I'll trade it in and buy one of the other Mac products the other Mac product, the Mac Mini that was introduced today, and I'll keep my 5-year-old MacBook Air because it's still a great machine, and I'm more in the market for desktop replacement. And I think jumping ahead, I think maybe that's. Which seems odd where the Mac Mini is, because they've really upgraded that in significant ways.
Yeah, I think I like the trade-in value for the Macs is pretty good too. I think about $325 for the ease of just trading in and recycling it and getting some money for it. I mean, you can't beat that.
What do you people do to your keyboards?
My keyboard's been fine on my MacBook Pro, so I kind of asked that too.
I don't know. I mean, maybe it's called typing. I mean, I have no idea. The odd thing is it's the O, which is maybe a commonly used letter, but it's really very soft and almost no tactile feedback. So when typing anything, when an O comes up, it just have to be real. So I've taken this point where basically I'll use it for triaging emails, and then basically reading and watching YouTube videos, watching Amazon movies and things. But for I've had to boot it aside for the Mac for Mac Air. If I want a notebook for serious work, just because it's not reliable. But back to today's MacBook Air, I guess it has the second or third generation of the keyboard, which, if I recall, the significant difference was, they added some sort of, enclosure, membrane around it to stop dust particles and maybe aliens coming in and gumming up the works.
Yeah, I just have to keep reiterating that. I mean, I know plenty of people, and I know these people, so I know they're legitimate, that they have keyboard problems. But I have I've never had, and I've had multiple generations. I have the MacBook, no problems, zero problems, and it's pretty mobile. I mean, it's in and out of a lap or a backpack, and it goes everywhere. So I just don't get it. I was really glad to see the 2 ports. That just seems to be, one for charging and one for anything else that you need, since these are flash-based devices. Right. So that was one thing that is missing on the first MacBook, or on the MacBook, I should say. But so it seemed like a very, very nice machine, no question about it, and decent price point. I saw a little bit of griping on Twitter that she wasn't the first MacBook Air, less, and it's like, well, yeah, okay, but we have all this new stuff with it.
Yeah, it was, but technology moves on, and
it does.
SSD is more expensive than spinning drives, so and Retina display is more expensive than the others. So, if you don't want to pay that, like David said, the original old stale MacBook Air is there. So, I mean, really, I think it's there. If if you're a budget buyer, then you have a solution. If you want high end performance, you can upgrade to huge amounts of memory and SSD. As well as there are some entry level configurations. So I think they've made a very versatile MacBook Air product line, and no wonder. I think I saw a little bit on Twitter that a lot of people seem surprised by Tim's statement that the MacBook Air was their most popular machine. Didn't surprise me at all, because I see them everywhere. But I think they've really rejuvenated an old friend that had gone stale.
To your point of the solid state storage, I really think it was a smart move on Apple's part to just stay with solid state. The mechanical drives are a thing of the past, and I don't think any machine in the line now has the mechanical drives anymore. If I'm not correct,
I think an iMac still offers them with Fusion, but I think maybe it's the only one.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, solid state drives are cheap. I mean, you can buy a 1 terabyte solid state drive for under $200 now, so the prices have come down. Granted, Apple's charged the premium for them putting it in for you. Let's face it, because a 1 terabyte or 1.5 terabytes would be going anywhere between $400 up to $1,400, depending on which Mac you're looking at. But and then the same thing with the memory. I think the memory, you definitely should go to 16 gigs. And I think 8 just isn't enough, in my opinion. But some people may not really care about that. They want a good basic model, and the entry level machine with the 8 gigs is perfectly fine.
Right. Andrew, what did you make of the cheer that went up when it was announced that this is made of 100% recycled aluminum? And that got a huge cheer, which I thought was, that's admirable, but...
I did think it was a little surprising, but at the same time, I think that's really good what Apple's doing, and I commend them on that. I think that, we all hear this thing in the news about climate change, and it's a very real thing, and we're seeing more and more news about it. And I think Apple, what they're doing with environmentalism is really good. And I was really glad to see that it's, they've made that list of, what they've been doing for years, like their list of chemicals they're not using. And this goes a little bit further than that. And when it's completely 100% aluminum, recycled aluminum, I think that's pretty impressive, in my opinion.
I agree.
And for listeners across the pond, that's aluminium.
Right. Fair point. Yeah, it's great. Don't misunderstand. I'm not putting it down. I was just surprised at the reaction that it got. There were other things I thought that were at least as important, if not more so, and it was just like average applause. But when that came out, I was like, wow, okay.
To me,
important to somebody.
To me, there's another dimension of the surprise. One is the fact that it's an audience of mostly journalists who pretty much just tend to be pretty close-lipped, and very, very spare with showing any sort of enthusiasm for anything. So I really think we're seeing that there's definitely a shift in values that people are treasuring the environment more, treasuring being green and recycling. So, I don't know how many times they said it, but they said it's this is the greenest Mac yet. So that popped up everywhere, and it's even on their website. So it's obviously something Apple is very justifiably proud about.
Yeah, and rightfully so. They should be. I mean, a lot of their products, they've been really sticking to the environment, and each time a new machine comes out, they're more and more sustainable for recycling their products. So,
yeah. Well, let's move on to the Mini. This was a surprise to. What?
Can we cheer? Sorry.
Yeah, no, sure. Cheer all you want. Yeah, I mean, this was sort of a surprise, but not really. Tim Cook had made statements quite a while ago now, it seems. I know, I guess it doesn't seem it is, that the Mini was an important part of the line. That's another thing that just got a huge number of cheers. And it does not look like this is a machine that they have hobbled a whole lot. I mean, obviously, it's not going to compete with some of the higher-end things, but it's not a cheap little machine with cheap little performance.
Yeah. I think that really what they were aiming towards was having a machine that could be an entry level as well as can be expanded all the way up to a professional level. So you can't beat that at all as far as that goes. And I think it's fair what they priced it at and what they're offering as far as once we could dig into some of the features they've added.
Yeah. So are anybody here in the market for a Mac Mini for any reason other than that you just want one?
No.
Mark is.
So. Yeah, because I've been I'm waiting all year to see what happens and see Apple play its cards. My iMac, 27-inch iMac, unfortunately, this is the first generation it can't upgrade to Mojave, I guess, due to the graphics card it has. It's a 2011 model,
right?
And it's still a great system, and I'm thinking that since right now I have a Mac Mini that I use basically for server functions, and I managed it by doing remote desktop into it, I could just get this new Mac Mini, and it's a real powerhouse, and I could use remote desktop connection to connect to it, and that saves me variety of different upgrade paths on an iMac. So. And that looks very, very attractive to me.
So you would use this to replace an iMac. What are you going to do for a screen? Are you going to buy an Apple screen?
I would keep the current screen, and I would basically just use it as a display. I wouldn't use its CPU. I'd use it to connect to the Mac Mini, via remote desktop. And it could easily populate the iMac screen with pixels. So I'd use basically a drop-in desktop replacement.
Okay, that's interesting.
And since the bulk of what I do is not video, it's a lot of words, numbers, graphics, but it's graphics for presentation, not so much editing. I think. I think this sort of screen within a screen approach is very workable. Well, that's the theory. We'll see. Let's do a show in 6 months and find out.
I mean, I think really there is some great displays out there. I hate to mention the word Dell, but Dell does have some very good monitors you can get out there. And the great thing about this Mac Mini is it has HDMI 2. It's got Thunderbolt 3, Thunderbolt 2 if you get an adapter. So, I mean, I think you got a lot of flexibility when it comes to displays if you decide, this isn't going to work. Because I never even thought about you could use an iMac as just a separate standalone display. That's interesting.
I have to say that this one, the connectivity on this, I didn't do an analysis, so I don't know if it's the most connectivity of any Mac. But it's certainly in there pitching with the iMacs. I mean, there's you can hook this thing to just about anything.
I think it has more connectivity than the iMac. I think the only thing right now available is the 5-year-old Mac Pro, the so-called trash can model.
Yeah.
In terms of something modern, it had what? I think four Thunderbolt 3 USB, it had HDMI 2, Ethernet, or choice of 10 gigabit Ethernet, for $100 option. So it's no wonder that they were really subtly, all the demos that they were focusing on is using it for server applications, because it's 4 or 6 cores. And who's that company? Was it Mac Stadium? The guys in Las Vegas that they came up and showed that as an image just to subliminally drive home the message that this is a good server building block.
Yeah.
I think for anybody in the pro community who needs something for faster rendering, who has maybe been holding their breath and didn't find the entry price starting $49.99 Power Mac attractive, I think this is a really sweet product for those users.
Yeah, we talked to the guys from Mac Stadium at WWDC, and they were showing us the racks they had developed to mount iMac Pros. And I can imagine they're now going to be all over this, because obviously it takes up a lot less space. And these are pretty darn powerful little machines. So it makes you want one, just because you almost just want to see what you can do with it. Not in my case to necessarily replace an iMac or a MacBook Pro, but just to have a Mac that can run headless if you wanted to or needed to, and can do so many things and do them well now. So
yeah, it might be. What do you render your videos on now? An iMac?
iMac or MacBook Pro. Yeah, depending on where I'm editing the video.
Okay. So this might be a nice little render engine for when you're at your home-based studio.
Yeah, it very easily could be. Very easily could be.
So speaking of the Mac Pro, the reason why I was a little disappointed about this Mac Mini is because aside from upgraded internals, it seems to me that it's mostly the same as the 2004 Mac Mini. Like, to me, it just doesn't seem like as big of a jump. And the Mac Mini, the Mac Pro started out as this trash can Mac. That was the last update. And now we saw that report where they're going to try to turn it into this, modular system. And my idea was that was going to be what the Mac Mini was. I thought that they were going to give us this sort of preview of that modular system, where maybe the Mac Mini would have this totally new design, and people would be able to once again easily swap out all the internals. But it seems to me that it's mostly the same as past models.
I don't know. I kind of think the days of Apple letting you swap things in and out are pretty much gone. For lots of reasons, not just their own reasons, but just the idea that we have Thunderbolt 3 and you have so many things that go right to the motherboard, the way that only PCI slots could before. So, they're infinitely more expandable if you just have a plug. And I think you might even argue that they might even be cheaper. That might not be accurate, because it's been a while since I've done anything with PCI cards. But
which I was really surprised about, the fact that they were going to let the memory be swappable. That was a very pleasant surprise, I should say, because like you said, Apple is not known to wanting to use swapping any hardware for that matter.
Yeah.
Right.
On the other hand,
sorry.
No, go ahead, Mark.
So this is in many ways an about face of the Mini. They introduced in what year? What were you mentioning, Andrew? 2012, 2013, where they had gone from a relatively open, feature-rich to to basically sort of a closed but lower cost but lower functionality system. I think they've maybe gotten so much grief over not having a pro sort of component that maybe they've gone back to sort of some of the original feelings of the Mac Mini that it's small in size and price, not in capability.
Andrew's point, though, that's interesting. I mean, do you think that there could be a Mac Mini-like module as part of the new Mac Pro? I don't know.
A building block of a Mac Mini physically, I don't think that, but they might. Actually, I'm really open about that. I think they will be modular, but in some different dimension. I don't think we'll be at the level of sliding multiple Mac Minis in there. Nor do I think it will be maybe sliding multiple Mac Mini motherboards into a backplane to be able to expand it. Just because the ergonomics are different, and what's that saying? Form follows function. So.
The one thing I think it will have in common with a new Mac Pro would be the connectivity.
Oh yeah, I think new Mac. Yeah, I mean we're all seeing a 10 gigabit Ethernet on the Power iMac. So I'm a little surprised that Apple didn't bite the bullets and just make it 10 gigabit Ethernet. Their jobs in sense of throw out this old technology and you go exclusively with the new. It seems to be diminished in the current Apple, but I think there is a lot better and faster silicon technology out there, and they should embrace it. While also for the pro users who are screaming for modularity, and I think Apple did that famous mea culpa, and that they've learned the lesson. So. I agree with Andrew. I was thinking, is it possible that would they run the tables and update every single Mac today? And I was hoping they would. As a shareholder, I was hoping they would. Mm-hmm. They didn't for whatever reason. So next year we'll have to see what happens. I guess with iMacs and the Mac Pro.
Well, before we leave the Mac space, one thing that did come out I've seen in the news feeds, and I haven't had a chance to do a lot of research, but apparently the MacBook Pros are going to get a new graphics card or graphics processor at the end of November. Have you seen this?
Not yet.
No, I haven't.
Yeah. There's something out there. I'm pretty sure 9to5Mac had it. Somebody else had it too. That it was done via press release, not as part of the event today.
That would make sense because if you look at these things, they're so fundamentally different that we have this new Mac and it has a new faster card. It's almost why bother? It's diluting their message.
Yeah. Oh, I don't misunderstand. It's interesting to note that you were talking about running the table, and okay, so the iMacs didn't get any love today, but it looks like this would be the second update to the MacBook Pro for this year. Now we don't know if it's at 13, 15, what, but I just wonder if this maybe wishful thinking on my part that Apple's going to start doing a little more regular updates to things, just a little more speed bump kind of things.
I think they should. I mean, under Jobs, they seem to do that regularly. But why it's not a factor now, don't know. But I mean, this is a topic that this show and others we've talked about. We don't need to dig into it all over again. But when you say the end of the month, which month? October? Because that's tomorrow.
I'm sorry, November. Pardon me.
Oh,
November.
Okay.
Yeah, November. Late November is, I think, the exact quote. So.
Well, it's still in time for holiday season. So.
Yeah.
And year-end budgets and things. So.
That's not a small consideration. So next up, Angela Ahrendts took the stage to what seemed like almost a hero's welcome.
It was an insane amount of cheering. I was awesome. I was kind of excited about it because I'm a big pro Apple retail store, and it was very pleasant to see that.
I think this is the only second time she's been on stage, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I believe you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, she introduced today at Apple for the first time when she was on stage last time. So
yeah,
and they expanded upon it. So
and I love that. I absolutely loved it just because I feel like Apple is filling in some of the needs. They're developing all this cool technology, but you have to sort of learn to use it on your own, and not talking just about the hardware, but also the software. And so, yeah, naturally, the creative thing is a little bit easier to do, but from a standpoint of teaching, because people want to come in and they want to learn how to take a better photograph. They don't necessarily want to learn how to build a better spreadsheet.
No.
So, I feel like they're really firing on all cylinders in that regard.
Yeah. I mean, I've attended a lot of the sessions, more so because I want to see what they're doing. And of course, I'll learn something new all the time, every time. And I've gotten to know a lot of the pros that do the sessions in the various local Apple stores here. But to expand upon all these other sessions even more so than ever, even bringing in guests. I've attended some sessions where they bring guest speakers in to talk with other subject matter experts. Just doing that in itself is just, God, that's so exciting. I mentioned it on another podcast I was on earlier today. I said, people come to the Apple Store because they want to have a good experience. We pay the premium for their products because we have the option to be able to go into this store and be able to get our problem solved, or be able to learn something, or be able to do any of a number of things. I mean, try doing that with any other company that makes these similar devices. You're not going to get that experience. So for those who complain about how expensive their products are, it's the return on investment all by itself is right there, just for that reason in itself.
Yeah. When they first talked about the Apple stores becoming sort of community centers, right, kind of thing, I have to admit I was a little skeptical. But this seems like it's one of those cases where you didn't see the rest of the picture. Now you see it. What she started, and now it's going to turn into these little mini education centers constantly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
yeah, Andrew, I don't know where you're located. Do you have Apple stores near you, physically near you?
Unfortunately, I don't. I live in kind of a smaller city, and the nearest Apple store is pretty far away. But speaking of education, what I really like about this is that I don't remember exactly how many there were, but when I wrote about this earlier, there was a couple of sessions that was specifically teacher focused. And I think that's really good that Apple is focusing a little bit more on education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go David.
No, my wife's a teacher, so I get to hear a lot of education, just learning on what she experiences. So going into these stores, I mean, sometimes I will go in the Apple store and just watch, observe, see what happens. I'm crazy because I'm an Apple fanatic. Of course, I'm going to do this. But just I went in one time and they had a whole group of Girl Scouts that were in the store, and they were teaching them how to do video. And what they would do is they would be using their iPhones or be provided iPhones. They were recording different things that were walking around the store. Relates, they had like a one of the robots and those kinds of things. Then they went back, edited it, and then they brought it up on the big screen because all the Apple stores have those large screens to be able to show it. And it was what a pleasant experience watching this and just kind of seeing how these kids are getting educated going into a retail store. It just doesn't. It's unheard of. It really is.
That's cool.
Well, I think this is going to become even more of a competitive advantage for Apple.
Absolutely.
Because, if you want help from Google, well, where do you go? I mean, you go on the web and, okay, well, it's not a live person that you can say, oh, well, how do you do this? Or why did you do that?
Google it.
So I think I agree with you, Chuck. When Angela first introduced this, it seems a little unbelievable, but now that they're really fleshing it out, and I think actually now that they had the videos, you could see the number of classes and range of classes that they were giving. I know that recently in some white trips, the Apple store, there have been Apple events going on. And that is a dramatic difference in the past. And I think this is even more strategically important because systematically, I think a problem that a lot of manufacturers have is they don't invest enough in training, to make sure that their users are really able to get the most out of whatever their product is. And ultimately that hurts them. And because there's profitability pressure at manufacturers, they don't do much more than put a manual together, or maybe some tutorials on the website, but nothing that's refreshed and constantly updated going forward. So I think Apple is very shrewdly seeing that this sort of enabling to people to see, to learn by doing. It sort of translates into wanting by seeing, as a competitive advantage.
Well, I think they're also doing it when you buy a product for the first time, brand new. In a matter of a day or two, you get an email saying, "Hey, we'll set up a 30-minute session with you, and we'll show you how to use your product." When I got my new Apple Watch, I can go on, and I've done it. I mean, I didn't think I needed to do it, but I wanted to do it because I wanted to experience it to see what it is. It's great. I mean, they share it. They share an Apple Watch on the screen with you, and they go through it, and they spend 30 minutes with you going through everything you want to know about your particular product. I mean, that's unheard of in any company that I've seen. I've worked in retail for a very long time, so I've seen how retail has been. Obviously, it was a long time ago, but this is just really one of many things that's exciting about what Apple does in the retail area as far as that goes.
It just feels like they've got it figured out. Maybe they don't execute perfectly every time on everything, but they aspire to it. And that is one of the things I love. I also think it's interesting, the idea that, because a lot of these things are aimed at kids too.
Yeah.
And I don't mean they're juvenile situations, but they include kids. Mm-hmm. And so instead of trying to fight it out in the educational market and constantly, I mean, we all hear the analysts scream, Apple needs a cheap computer or cheap something to put in the education market. Maybe they don't. Maybe they just need to capture the imaginations of the kids, because where those imaginations go, the parents' dollars follow.
As well as also, they've also been making hay over this everything code, everything can create this curriculum development, and I think Angela today pointed out some of the success they've had in Europe. I know certainly I've heard these numbers and the successes on Ken Ray's Mac OS Ken show, and to me it's really interesting why is Apple, and sort of a U.S. based company, why are they having more success seeing their curriculum adopted in schools in Europe than they are here? And I don't think it's for lack of we just didn't hear the statistic, but I think there is a big opportunity for getting there first in terms of showing people how to use your products and what they can do. And since they keep coming out with new features and new capabilities, it's not something static. We can just have curriculum and and then update it so that you now have manual for such and such cloud version 5 or 6 or 7. They're out there. I don't know if you heard it. They're doing a introductory video course using Clips, which is the iPhone app. So. Clearly, they're constantly shifting and moving and experimenting, and Viva Apple, good for them.
Yeah. And as as a video guy, I think that's really very interesting that they're putting an emphasis on clips, because it's a very simplified thing, but again, for kids to make a quick video. You're introducing them to video. You're introducing them to creativity with something that's built in. You don't have to buy anything else other than the Apple product. I mean, it really is brilliant. And then if the kids are creating those things in the Apple stores and getting to put them up on the big screen, I mean, wow, what kid wouldn't love that?
Yeah,
I would love that.
Right. Exactly.
Just to add on to Mark's point, as far as Apple is not perfect by no means. No company is. I mean, believe me, I've heard horror stories of people dealing with stuff at Apple, and me being, all of us being the Apple fans we are, you hate to hear it, but it does happen. So, I mean, there are going to be situations where, unfortunately, they had a bad experience. The repair went bad. They didn't get fixed properly. But you know what? Apple replaces the product. I mean, the bottom line is, when it gets down to that, if you continue to go back and have a problem with a repair, they're going to replace it. So, I mean, just like with anything else that we've been talking about, Apple does stand by their products, and that's, you're never going to see that anywhere else.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to, I guess, what should be considered the headline, since it was the last thing, and that's the new iPads. I'm just going to throw it out there. Andrew, I want to let you start this time. What did you think? What impressed you the most?
I'm very excited about this announcement. I was more excited, honestly, than the iPhone keynote, and I'm definitely going to be saving my pennies for this new iPad. It's a completely new design. It's got a new physical model that is kind of like basically exactly like the iPhone 5. And then it has the screen with the curved edges like the iPhone XR, they're calling it Liquid Retina. And it has Face ID, and it's got a new Apple Pencil, and it's got all this new great stuff, and I'm pretty excited about it.
Mark?
I agree with what Andrew said, and I think I would amplify it that, some of their hidden messages that, it's faster than 92% of other computers in the market. And, by the way, this single model sold more than all the notebooks of anybody else, which makes it the most popular computer model in the world. So, they're definitely moving ahead, sort of positioning it as a computer. They said, we have the new keyboard. It has two new angles, one for your lap, one for a desktop. And then it really jumped out at me as they're showing sort of the screen by screen and slide over. That's basically different. That's the idiom of an iPad for having multiple windows that you have on a Mac. Now, true, maybe you don't have as many, but the direction is really clear. It's so much so that, I'm thinking, again, part of the reason feeding back into why I'm thinking of a Mac Mini instead of maybe another MacBook Air or something is, I think that we're maybe on the verge where the iPad can certainly start to replace what a Mac does, probably for, I'd say, 75, 80% of people out there. And, it's stunning. One thing I noticed is, I don't know if I heard the word Intel once during this presentation. And the only thing we heard is, in the Mac Mini, it has 4 or 6 cores. And then when, what was his name? John Turnus, was that the iPad Pro VP hardware engineer who was speaking? He was making a point, they've got 7 GPU cores, 8 CPU cores, 4 low power, 4 for high efficiency. And, if you look at, all the processing, that, they highlighted as being done by that basketball game and, by that walk-in 3D scene from the Adobe app, there's a hell of a lot of horsepower, in that device. So, I think that, clearly Apple is, maybe doubling down its bet, on that thing, sort of, as a mobile computer going into the future.
David, what'd you get in on this?
Yeah, I'll definitely agree with all of Andrew's and Mark's points. One of the things I think really stood out to me is the bold decision of going to USB-C over Lightning. I think the biggest thing that's going to really make this a product that's going to really be a desktop replacement. And I did a presentation on many years ago that I think that could the iPad Pro be your permanent desktop. Well, I think this is very close now. I mean, because now you can hook your USB-C connector on your iPad directly to a 4 or 5K monitor and get exactly the desktop experience. So I think that in itself really stands that out. agree with this. The screen is incredible. The pencil, I mean, my gosh, being able to double click with the pencil, being able to switch between screens, showing that demonstration with the Photoshop, going zooming in, zooming out. So a lot of great features they've added to this. And then the bezel, the thin bezel design, huge. And then of course Face ID and no more button, no Touch ID anymore. So they come even further in the 8 years the iPad has been in existence. I mean, I said this too, comparing the iPad, the first generation iPad I had that versus now, the size, the thickness of it, 12.9 millimeters versus now it's at 5.9 millimeters. What a drastic change! I mean, in 8 years to go that thin and then just add a lot of more of these features, and then the size of the screens are awesome. I have the 10.5 inch right now. Now you go to 11 inch, not much difference, but the 12.9 been around. I mean, the same size, but close to the size of a piece of 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So I mean, I could go on and on. It just a lot of incredible things they've added to this.
Yeah, and actually, that was my main observation too. Going back on that conversation, where it seems to me that Apple's, especially with this new MacBook Air, it seems to me that they're more and more positioning the iPad as the computer for everyone, whereas the MacBooks, even the MacBook Air, might be more for pros. And with this USB-C port, it can have more and more accessories, and I think that further cements this plan that Apple is going moving forward.
Yeah. One other thing I'll point out too, which I'm kind of surprised and kind of disappointed about, is the power. It's only including an 18-watt power supply with USB-C. Now, USB-C definitely could charge a device a lot faster and a lot more powerful. So I'd be curious to see how these iPads will charge, as far as the quickness of how long it takes for them to charge, using that charger. Because I know a lot of people have been making a huge deal about that. It relates to that too.
Well, I think the solution is clear. There's third-party aftermarket products.
Right. Or get a MacBook power adapter.
Yeah, exactly. But I think this is what I was alluding to before, the fact they're using Thunderbolt 3 and they have the same connector on the new MacBook Air, their MacBook, the MacBook
Right.
Pros. I think that's a big deal. And let alone, did you notice that they showed both, it was connecting to the camera as well as to the screen?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I was going to point that out. Your DSLR could plug right into it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I think, this is going to be a great opportunity for developers to be able to use that to create apps that connect and talk with third-party other storage or audio gates, or who knows what sort of hardware you want to connect to it.
Yeah.
Well, and somebody was really smart by setting this up and I guess the USB-C is what makes it obviously possible, but that you'll be able to charge your iPhone from the iPad. I mean, that's because you're walking around with this huge battery, and this, I'm sure there will be instances where you will want to buy, because they did say that I guess there's an LTE model, or will be an LTE model available.
Yeah, there's both.
Yeah, but it's just, there's so many nice little things. The inductive charging, the magnetic attachment of the Apple Pencil, and it looked, the way I understood it, it looked like you could attach it to any edge.
Right.
And it would charge. I don't think there was a designated, this is where you do it to charge.
Yeah, wireless charging, that was huge with the Pencil. It's just amazing. The other thing too is I had thought originally when they were the announcement that the SIM card was going to be only an eSIM, but I see it's going to be dual. So it's going to be nano SIM and eSIM together. So at first I had thought that there was mentioned just eSIM, but apparently not.
Yeah.
So again, leading technology from the iPhone is being adopted by and integrated into other products, which is something Apple does very well.
Now, one thing about the USB-C, it is not Thunderbolt. I don't know if you guys knew that, but it is not a Thunderbolt. It's a USB-C 3.1, like the Gen 2. So you can't do Thunderbolt with it, which I thought at first it was, but it is not. So.
And with a 1 terabyte storage option, I mean, that's now we are into laptop territory.
$1,700 was the price point with the 1 terabyte space. So,
yeah,
right.
But you know what? I mean, that's okay because that's for an Apple product. That's what you're going to pay.
Right. Yep.
And if you compare that, say, to the MacBook Air, with for $1,799, you can get what is it? I think 512 gigabytes and 32 gigabytes of RAM.
The Air only gets 16.
Or maybe only 16.
Yeah.
So again, they're from price wise, they're very, very comparable. But I'm starting to get excited that maybe it's time to go out and play with the MacBook Pros and
And then Apple's being fair. The 10.5 inch is still going to be available, and they also have the original that iPad was the 6th gen, which is the affordable one, $329, and then the iPad Mini 4 is still around too. So you have 5 choices of models to choose from. So
right. Again, I think what Apple is doing is they're recognizing that older products don't have to die. They can. When a new one is introduced, they can live at a lower price point for a while, and it actually serves Apple good benefit because not everybody's going to want to pony up for $1,800 for a new high end system every year.
Right.
Well, and you guys know how I hate rumors, but at the same time, there's been so much. There've been different things going back and forth over the last couple of weeks about the iPad Mini. And I thought that it was just interesting that they specifically said, I mean, it came out of somebody's mouth that, and the iPad Mini 4. So does that mean, because as I recall, the rumor was that they didn't expect to see any upgrade to that now, but maybe later in the year.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah, I know you. I knew I was going to say something about that. I know you're not a big fan of rumors, so. But yeah, they were saying that it was. They were saying maybe it could be the iPad Mini 5. It's going to probably be released sometime in 2019, probably maybe first quarter 2019. Maybe they coordinated around the time. Maybe that Mac Pro was supposed to come out in 2019. Who knows? Again, all rumor, speculation. So.
But again, sorry.
No, just right quick. I feel like the form factor for the iPad Mini is such a great form factor, and I know there are those that say, "Well, gee, the iPhone XS Max is sort of the borderline replacement." Not quite so much. I feel like the iPad Mini is more a large paperback book. And it's ideal for that. Yeah. And sure, the large iPhones are good, but it just feels, at least to my hand, it feels more comfortable. I have a Mini 4 and I use it all the time. Not necessarily as a production machine, but as a reading machine or a surfing machine. And I find it very, very useful. So I hope it stays in the line.
I had one of those for a period of time, and I agree with you. It's a nice little iPad, and I like I did like the form factor of it. So I had to give it up because it was a unit for work. But once I did get to have it for a little while, and it was it's a nice little unit. But again, it's dated. The display is not as great, compared to the other iPad models in the line. But there's always hope.
Yeah. But again, there's a point of again, having some of the older models, because if they need to do really high volume purchase agreements with institutions like schools or companies, they always have the ability. Okay, if you can't afford this, we can give you this discount on this on this other model. So I think it just helps Apple get into the market. And again, since functionality wise, they're all running iOS 12. There's no real problem. It's just a price trade-off. It only when it becomes a point when they're not going to be able to run the latest OS that that's the point. They should shoot it and discontinue.
Right. Apple's been very fair with the OS. I mean, over across the iPhone as well as the iPad, allowing for these older models to work with the latest version of the OS is pretty awesome. Now, speaking of iOS, if we touch upon this yet, but 12.1 was also released today too. So the released along that along with Mojave 10.14.1 just got released as well. So lots of updates today too, and now we can do FaceTime with 32 continuous connections. Maybe we start using FaceTime for our sessions here, right, Chuck? So
I can figure out a way to record it properly.
yeah, that's right. There's no product to record it, but you could have 32 people.
Oh, there will be. I guarantee you, by this time next year, there will be a full screen app for recording FaceTime off of.
There's got to be
your iMac.
Yeah,
that'd be nice.
Yep. I have to say, I'm not a game guy, as you know, but the game demo was impressive.
Oh, God, that basketball game was incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, but the thing that I kept watching, I wasn't watching the basketball players. I was watching the crowd. And the crowd was amazing.
Oh, it was. You could see them cheering. You see that. It's just like you felt like you were at the basketball game. I mean, even of course, they had to show the basketball player sweating, and you could so you could see how hard he's playing. But no, you're right. This AR for gaming is just becoming more and more realistic. It's crazy.
And Andrew, again, you're the first. This is your first time here, so I'm not sure. Are you a gamer? Do you pay attention to games?
Not usually. Although I did recently buy the Civilization 6 because that came out not only on iPad but also recently on iPhone, and that's also made by 2K, who is there today, and that's also a graphically intense game, I think, and it plays perfectly on my iPhone, so I think it will play great on this new iPad.
Which iPhone do you have, Andrew? Which iPhone do you have?
Oh, the 7 Plus.
Well, okay.
Wow. So this is like 2 years old now, and it still works great.
And so the game did play very well. That's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
Interesting. The other thing too, and I think Mark, you've alluded to it, was the Photoshop demo on the iPad. I mean, that, first of all, if I were a graphic tablet maker, I'd probably be finding a new job because that just is going to blow everything away. I know it's not here quite yet, but you're watching a living, breathing example of it. And so if you're a Photoshop geek, I would think this would just be amazing for you.
We'll have to see, because in the past, when Adobe's had Lightroom and other products on the map, they have some gotchas that are not apparent at first that lead such that it's not a full bona fide replacement for a desktop version. So it looks very. I would agree. It probably will meet the needs of 80, 85, maybe 90. Maybe 95% of photo editors out there, but I suspect there's going to be still some high-end features, functionality that will only be available to people who are Creative Cloud month-to-month subscribers.
And you just said it. It's going to be real interesting to see how they price the whole model, whether they do it just for the iPad, for the whole bundle, or what. I'm sorry, Andrew. Go ahead.
Going on that, what I think would be nice, and I've heard that this is a big feature on the wish list of some graphic designers, but now that the new iPad has USB-C, I wonder if you could eventually, directly hook up the iPad to your Mac and actually use it as a drawing tablet, kind of like Wacom, because you can kind of do it now, but there are workarounds. So I'm wondering if maybe it would be a lot better now.
But do you need to? I mean, depend? And again, there's so much speculation here. But if the Photoshop on the iPad is just as capable as the Photoshop on your desktop, and by the way, you can plug that iPad into a full display. Do you think you really need what's on the desktop at this point?
Yeah, that's a good point. And now that, they kept using the phrase, this is the real Photoshop, so maybe you don't need that as much anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think I interpreted Andrew's comment in a different way, Chuck. I interpret him saying that through software you could make the iPad, a drawing tablet like a Wacom, to complement what you're doing on your Mac. Not. And so you're raising the question of, well, do you even need to do it on your Mac? And I'd say one answer: 27 inches. So yes, you do still need your Mac.
Okay, good point. I mean, I still want my Mac. Don't misunderstand. And I'm not a Photoshop guy, so I do want the space for everything else. So that's. But I keep looking at them plugging that monitor in, and I just wonder what that experience is going to be like. Because if my monitor is over here, and I have to touch the device down here to make it happen, I mean, does that turn the iPad into sort of a mouse-like device in some fashion? I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of anxious to experience that, not for graphics, but just as almost a control service.
Well, if we were the Onion writing a headline about this, it would be something like, Apple announces world's most expensive mouse.
I think I may cut that from the show. I don't know, guys.
but I mean, the thing is, to me, it's sort of like using a screwdriver as a hammer. Yes, you could use the iPad for all of these other applications, but I don't think that's its sweet spot.
Oh no, I agree. It's just, listen, we've seen it in our community and the tech press. How many years have they been trying to replace their laptops with an iPad, and then complain about the fact that it can't. So at least up to this point, now we may have entered a new space here. I don't know. But
one thing I'm intrigued about is, again, with the USB-C, is what happens if you plug that into a storage device? Can you use that and all of a sudden back up your 1 terabyte of stuff that's on your iPad? So I didn't have a chance to dig into the website. Andrew, David, do either of you have any insight into what you can drive when you connect it to the new iPad Pro?
So earlier, I had read the hands-on review from The Verge, and they actually specifically mentioned that. So you still can't use an external hard drive with it. You can directly add things like they showed in the demo video, like a camera, but that will only automatically open up the Photos app. So you won't be able to import photos into something like Lightroom automatically. I'm not sure if you can connect a USB-C flash drive, though. I guess that might still be up in the air.
Well, again, there's going to be new adapters coming soon. If we wanted to, just because we've had those adapters, the video adapters, and the USB adapter, if you want to be able to hook a thumb drive to it. So I would think that hasn't changed.
Yeah, you're going to have to, I mean, again, I'm thinking video work, you're going to have to be able to get a microphone input in.
That too.
Yep. So, there are plenty of reasons. Oh, Mark's holding up an adapter.
For my MacBook, I have one of these adapters that has another USB-C. It has video, and has another has a USB 3 connector. So there's all sorts of stuff like this, universe. And I expect after today's announcement, we're going to see even more come onto the market.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if that adapter would actually work.
Yeah, and it'll be real interesting to see what happens at CES this year with the Mac and Apple-centric third-party developers, how many things they've developed real quick. Yeah. Because I can think of several devices right now that will... In fact, I know one particular storage device I'm thinking of. I can plug in to my iMac and dump the photos. Off to my iPad, and dump the photos off onto it. And so they will allow you to do some things like that now, and it would only make sense they would allow you to do at least that much with USB-C. Huh.
As I say, I think it's now that they've joined with a standard connector, there's now this pressure. I mean, we're not the only people discussing this today. It'll be interesting if there's a roundup, how many other podcasts in the next couple of weeks also have raised this question of when will you be able to connect the MacBook Pro, the new iPad Pro to a storage device.
Yeah.
There's some sort of restriction that Apple has in place that they just don't want it to happen.
Well, I had always read that the reason that you couldn't hook up an external drive was because that sort of thing draws a little bit of power at the same time that it's connected. And I don't think Apple wanted to make that sacrifice.
But the thing is, with the USB-C, there is, to meet the spec, it has to be able to source a certain amount of power. And granted, if you're plugging into a hard drive that's going to suck too much power, it could refuse to operate. But if you're plugging into a flash drive, which will take a light sip at power, there's no reason to do it. And I think in the day of Thunder, Lightning and all these other proprietary connectors, I just don't think there was enough demand out there. But today, I mean, they were showing a very tittillating video of the iPad connected to a monitor, connected to a camera. They're saying it's faster than 92% of the computers in the real world. What is needed to make this thing a real computer? Ability to connect to other peripherals over its USB-C port.
Ooh, whoa. A real computer. This is a real computer.
Wow.
Okay, so let's. I guess it all depends on how you define terms. I don't. Yes, it is a real computer, but it's not. It's not as functional as as its MacBook cousin. And if they really want to take over the world with their iPads, it's just a question of time before they let it connect to other peripherals.
I would agree with that, but I want to make sure we don't denigrate the poor new iPad Pros.
No, as I said, I'm really intrigued that it's next time in the market for a notebook. The size is right. Now the keyboard is right. Now with the iOS enhancements to be able to work with multiple windows, I think it may now be the perfect mobility device.
Guys, we're running out of time, or we're pretty much out of time, but there's one other thing I wanted to ask your reactions to. And it's a subtle thing, and it would only be for the Apple geeks. The fact that Johnny Ive was not narrating the video, that it was Phil Schiller. Does that mean anything, or?
Well, I found that to be very interesting why he was narrating it, but I think Johnny Ive is ready to retire. It seems like. I mean, I think he was close as it was anyway. So that's what I'm thinking. That he's set off into retirement. Still part of Apple, but I don't think he's going to be out in the public right now. So I found it was interesting. That's for sure.
Andrew?
My first reaction to that was, at T-Mo, we were having this live discussion in Slack, and my first comment was, for these videos, they should have the voice actor for Siri do these voiceovers. I think that would make it even more meta.
That would be funny.
I like it.
That would be good.
Mark, what do you think? Is this the dawning of Phil Schiller in some new fashion?
We'll have to see, but I think so. That's a separate question than the one you opened with. Of is there any hidden tea leaf, criminologist implication of Phil narrating it instead of John Ive? And I'd say to me, I've become accustomed when there's a new design, or maybe if there's a radically new manufacturing process, that's when we hear Johnny speak. So the fact that it was Phil instead of Johnny, it didn't seem strange to me.
Okay, good. Very good point. Very good point. It did seem like, though, that video was a bit more, I hate to say whimsical, but that was sort of my impression. It came across, a lot faster. It was a lot more, not more modern. Didn't have those long, slow pans that Johnny seems to love. So, yeah, it's just, again, only the Apple geeks in us would really pay attention to that kind of thing. But
yes,
you have to do it. Well, guys, thank you for your comments. This has been interesting. But before we go, I want to make sure we go around the room and let everybody know where they can find out where they can find you when you're not here. Andrew, since you're first here, let's find out where they can find you, because I already know.
Sure. So for most of my social media, I like to stick to the same username. So that username is Andrew or Not, and it's kind of a play on my name, even though my last name is ORR. This is OR Not. So there you go.
Okay, and you're on Twitter, Facebook, everything?
Twitter, I like to keep my Facebook a bit more personal, so I would recommend people follow me on Twitter.
Got it. Thanks so much for being here. It's great to have you. I hope this is the first of many visits.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Mr. Fuccio?
Oh, it's best way to reach me is on Twitter. It's at Mark, M-A-R-K, Fuccio, F-U-C-C-I-O. Or you can reach me also via LinkedIn.
Excellent. Thank you. Always fun. David, this is the second one we've done recently. I know where to find you, but where can everybody else find you?
Yes, so just yesterday. I am at intouchwithios.com, my podcast with Melissa Davis, and I am also can be found on Twitter at DaveG65.
Perfect. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is the MacJury on MacVoices. We hope we gave you some things to think about. We didn't want to do just an outright rehash. We wanted to get some reactions, and hopefully you got a little bit out of it, because we sure had a good time. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our MacVoices Facebook group and get more out of your Apple Tech with MacVoices magazine, free on Flipboard. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us at patreon.com/MacVoices and join these folks who help keep MacVoices coming to you. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.